This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience. David Housel said it best, the whole of the Auburn experience. It encompasses a wide variety of things, people, and yes, even different places. But at its core, it is all about our sports, all about our culture, and all about our family. And we thank you for joining us in this experience on episode 39. I am your host, Kyle Loomis, back along with my co-host, the best co-host in the land, the one that has to do all the research on who we should name this episode after, Mr. Austin Scott. Welcome back, and what you got for us?
Thank you, Kyle. War Eagle. We talked with our viewers pre-show, episode 39. We are in a stretch here where it is not easy to find the numbers that we're wanting to name these episodes off of. We mentioned Dylan Brooks pre-show. Dylan Brooks is transferred, so we can't cheat and use Dylan Brooks as our episode 39. He has spent time as part of the Auburn family, but has moved on to Kansas, and he is not part of the Auburn family at this moment. So episode 39, we're dedicating to two individuals. Marshall Myers is the current walk-on kicker from Opelika, Alabama.
Yes.
Got to shout out the local kid. And in my vast research that I spent, clearly days on figuring this out, the 1971 Iron Bowl defensive captain, John Hayworth, was number 39.
John Hayworth.
You, sir, are getting this episode dedicated to you, but also Marshall Myers. So now we've had a few in a row here that are all dedicated to kickers. And with my co-host here as a kicker, I feel like we just got to keep the train rolling.
I feel like you're just playing to, in benefit of yourself, for me to continue to keep you around, play to your audience, who really is the audience here, me, the kicker. Look, right. I appreciate my fellow special teams brothers out there, but, we'll move on from kickers and punters and things like that at some point, but it's nice to hear Marshall Myers currently getting a shout out. And I'm sure that he'll appreciate that if he finds that out there somewhere. So episode 39, Marshall Myers. And what was the last one you said?
John Hayworth, 1971, defensive captain of the Iron Bowl.
Dedicated to you. Let's roll with it. Auburn potpourri. We're going to bounce around to a bunch of little small things as we can. I got like a list of a few things that pop into our heads. Let's start with this. Kind of maybe gets us transition from last episode to this episode. The Auburn Regional. Obviously, we talked a lot about that last episode with Auburn falling out of that as the host team. I'm not going to rehash a lot of that right now in this episode, but we do have a conclusion to that. And since it involves the city of Auburn, we would at least want to mention it off the top. Southern Miss, probably as expected by a lot of pundits, because a lot of people maybe gave Auburn not as strong of a chance to get out, which they proved to be right. Southern Miss makes it out and moves on to the Super Regionals. And I believe they are currently as of the recording of this and playing in the final game of their Super Regionals. Is that where we're at?
Not quite. They did get to host. They are in Hattiesburg taking on Tennessee, but they did split 2 games today.
Okay.
And we'll be playing game 3 tomorrow for a winner-take-all game to go to Omaha.
But either way, the Golden Eagles get out of Auburn. Feels kind of sacrilegious to be talking about Golden Eagles that aren't Auburn, doesn't it?
I completely agree. It's unfortunate, but if they, we talk about our distant cousins of Tigers, I guess they are our distant cousins of Golden Eagles. So hats off to them, and we'll see if they make it to Omaha, Nebraska tomorrow.
Yeah, well, I don't know that I'm necessarily rooting for them, but I did at least want to mention that. And with this too, we kind of want to talk about this. I know you can hear probably stories counteracting this one, but I saw several posts from Southern Miss fans complimenting Auburn for how the overall regional was run, their experience there. So kind of hearkening back to what we talked a lot about with Penn State when they visited for football this past fall, having a great experience. So love to hear stories like that. People come to Auburn, and even if they're not a fan, unless they're an Alabama fan, and love it. So we appreciate them obviously coming and behaving themselves for the most part. And I guess congratulations and good luck to you if you want to do that. Here's something interesting that I wanted to mention. NIL, it's everybody's favorite topic, but I found this really interesting in summer where we don't have a lot of like concrete sports things to talk about, but this is kind of like a high-arching topic. Auburn sent an NIL delegation I guess at the invitation of now Senator, former coach Tommy Tuberville. That delegation was Bruce Pearl, Hugh Freeze, AD John Cohen, and women's basketball coach Johnny Harris. Am I missing anybody, Austin, or did you see anybody else that went there?
I'm trying to think. I think Dr. Roberts went.
Dr.
President Dr.
Roberts.
Roberts went. Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't. Did I put John Cohen there without him being there?
It was 5. He did
Okay.
go there. You're correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just missing Dr. Roberts.
Thank you. Okay, so their delegation, those 5 individuals, very well represented, went to go meet with Coach Tommy Tuberville about NIL, how it can be better regulated at the federal level. Thoughts, impressions about that? It's kind of a cool little Auburn connection happening there on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, no, super cool. And I think we heard about this kind of after the SEC coaches and athletic directors meeting, that there was going to be a contingent of SEC groups up there. But obviously, there aren't any other former Auburn or former SEC coaches up on Capitol Hill like Senator Tommy Tuberville is. So really cool to see that kind of interaction and them getting to interact with Senator Katie Brett from Alabama as well. And so it's all this big part of this big thing where we're all still trying to figure NIL out. Kyle, you and I have talked about it before. Pandora's box kind of got opened a little too quick with all this, and it has been the wild, wild west ever since. And so now we're all trying to figure out how much of the magic can we put back in the box, and it's not easy. And so really interesting to see their thoughts on it and to see them kind of up there lobbying for a little bit more regulation of it all. I think, in my personal opinion, it's much needed, but we'll see how far that goes. When anytime you can get, obviously the likes of Nick Saban and Kirby Smart and big time established successful coaches in D1 athletics up there, but when when Auburn, in Auburn's case, I can't speak for any other schools because I didn't see it. When you see 4 head coaches up there, that's a big deal. Or 3 head coaches and your athletic director, and then also the president of your university up to Capitol Hill. It shows you mean something. It means something to you. So it'll be very interesting to see how those impressions go. But really cool connection, definitely, with Coach Tubbs and the current Auburn coaches.
Yeah, look, I don't know how I feel about. I guess that's okay if Nick Saban was up there. I mean, not to get political here, but it's become known as the swamp up there, and he seemed pretty comfortable up there. So, hey, Nick,
he can stay.
That's what I'm saying. Look, surely there's somebody up there who needs a better process or something like that. So, surely he can retire and move on. And I mean, you saw what he did with Alabama. Maybe he can fix everything else. I mean.
I'd be happy to campaign.
Did I just say that? Did I just admit that? That just happened on an Auburn show, but here we are. So I feel now I need to go shower and cleanse myself of even admitting something nice about that. Let's move away from sports for just a second. Something that anytime we just get little fun things about the town of Auburn to mention, I'd want to give an opportunity to. And this is near and dear to your heart. I'm going to be honest. It's not that I'm not a fan of this. It just doesn't really, ring my bell or anything. But Austin, why don't you tell us some exciting news that's coming to Auburn for you, especially?
It'll be very interesting to see how wide the scope of this segment or this part of the segment goes here with our fan base and our viewers. Because we have, as we've talked with our viewers, we have people from all over that watch our show and probably have no idea what I'm about to talk about or even care. But a staple of my childhood and a staple of where I'm from and where I grew up is coming to Auburn, Alabama for its second go around. It has been here before.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Milo's Burger Shop is returning to the Plains. It is a massive day in my household and for my family. We are more
second
than
only
ecstatic.
to the birth of his children.
I did post on Facebook. So I'll peel just a little back very quickly. My wife and I have been investigating this for several weeks. Someone told us that this was a possibility, and there's a new development near our household that's on the University Suge Jordan Loop where we had heard that Milo's might be going into one of these storefronts. Ever since then, we've been investigating, and I mean like driving into the construction site, see if there's anybody there to ask them, look inside the windows, and search through countless Facebook posts. And finally, I was able to get some confirmation, subtle confirmation from the Milo's Burger Shop Twitter account in their DMs that Milo's is coming to Auburn. Subsequently, the day after, an article is written that confirms it all. So Milo's Burger Shop is somewhere that my wife and I have been a lot. I grew up going to a lot, and it is fantastic in my opinion. A lot of people won't share that opinion. That's fine, but I will be frequenting Milo's a lot as it is now just over a mile from my house, or will
Well,
be eventually. It's going to
listen,
be fantastic.
hey, whatever floats your boat, man. So let me get this straight. You slid in to Milo's DMs and still got a response?
100% don't regret a thing about it.
And yes, this is an example of the wide variety of content that you can expect on this show, but you can expect in the Auburn Potpourri segment. I knew I was going to get this type of response from you about Milo's, and that's why I wanted to at least bring it up because I love watching your little face light up. I mean, they have great sweet tea. I'm going to say that much. So
They
that
do.
excites me. But
I don't like sweet tea, but they do have
what's
good
wrong with
sweet
you?
tea from what I
What,
hear.
why am I doing this show with you? What's wrong with you? You do not like sweet tea?
You know, I do not. And you ask why you do this show with me. We've talked. We if you watch the YouTube, you've seen my father's comments pop up. My father sometimes asks why he's my father since I don't like sweet tea. So we're getting deep here. But no, I do not. I actually have. I do not like sweet tea.
I,
But
I'm shook.
I should let you know a very important detail here. Milo's Sweet Tea and Milo's Burger Shops are two different companies.
Yes, I was going to bring that up towards the end there, but I'm just I can't even talk. The idea that you don't like sweet tea is something that I
No,
will
sir.
have to wrestle with when we get done with this show and really
That's all right.
consider what happens in episode 40. So you never know what might happen after this point. All right, big segment number 1 tonight. Something that we have been excited to talk about is kind of doing a full year review for Auburn athletics. Now, we talked about doing this all in one sitting. It could be done in one show, but it feels maybe best served to spread this out. So, without further ado, what we're going to do is take each season, the fall, the winter, and the spring. It divides up pretty nicely, fairly evenly with some sports. And we're going to do a very brief highlight retrospect of the year that was with that and go from there. So, we're starting with the fall of 2022. And before we get to sports, Austin, this affects really all of them, but
Correct.
especially some fall ones because of some things that we'll get into, which the fall ones we'll be talking about, at least mentioning in some way: cross country, volleyball, soccer, and of course, football. But let's start off with what leads all of them: a brand new athletic director after the subsequent, well, whichever way you're supposed to say that. But
It's okay.
let me start that over. Alan Green decided right as the year was starting to leave his position. You can have that discussion whether his contract wasn't going to be renewed, not, however you would like to talk about that, but he was not going to be here. There was a need for a new athletic director. A lot of speculation about who that might be. I continue to vote for Quentin Riggins to be our athletic director. If you saw some other news we didn't have time to talk about today, he had bigger things coming down the line for him. So very happy to have him continue to be part of the Auburn family and help in whatever way he can, but not as athletic director. But most of you know the news now, but in retrospect, let's look back at it. Athletic director now for the Auburn Tigers, John Cohen, right after the Arkansas loss, because something else happened right after that. We'll get to that, but
somewhere in there, yeah. And you and I were talking in our preparation that this was confirmed nationally. I can't remember how a lot of things went. I remember John Cohen's name started popping up a lot, either during the Arkansas game, on the way home from the Arkansas game, and it was kind of, I don't know if I call it out of the blue. I mean, a sitting athletic director leaving where he was very
right.
prominent at Mississippi
SEC
State.
school.
Yes, as a head baseball coach who had a lot of success. So yeah, it was very, shocking. I think once it all came together quickly, and another factor into this is it was Dr. Roberts' first athletic director hire. Alan Green was hired by Stephen Leith, and so that was kind of another way. I think a lot of this was kept quiet because he had his own way of doing things, and this was all new for him as well. But yeah, and I think a lot of Auburn people were excited probably because it's someone with SEC experience and just experience in general too, has been around D1 athletics a lot. And I think looking in the 10 months since he's been, no, less than that, 8 months since he's been here, it's I think a lot of people are pretty happy about it, and I think
Yeah.
that it's been a good addition for Auburn so far, and I think his family fits in well.
Yeah.
Kyle, I mean, just hiring Malone, we got that got us a regional host, right?
Yeah, I mean, listen, if that's what it takes, to get a little check mark next to your name to start off the year, it's looking pretty good for him right now. Look, in all seriousness, it's been way too soon to even judge the the job that he's done because he hasn't been here a full year yet. But I, I fail to recall any major issues. Again, we keep alluding to it. The big issue he somehow probably had a hand in very quickly getting rid of it. That was a Chris Roberts decision. We'll get there. Let's get there. So we're going to get to the football. We know that's what most people want to talk about in the fall, but really quickly, let's run through the other sports. I do want to just mention, most of you forget that we do have a cross country team that does run in the fall. It's a very quick and short season. This was the first year under coach Leroy Burrell. Ran in about four regular season meets and then an SEC championship meet. And the big thing at the end was Ryan Kinane, I believe a senior, finished 89th overall at the NCAA championships. I know most of you are like, what? That doesn't seem that great, but it was a really good finish for him. And there are a lot of competitors there at NCAA championships. Let's talk about the fall sport, though, that most people are familiar with outside of football from this past year, and that was volleyball. What a year they had, and bursting onto the stage the way that they did. This was a time where I saw people finally on social media talking about, are we watching the volleyball match tonight? Because they went
Right.
on a historic run and found themselves somehow, some way, just continuing to climb the charts and make it into their second ever run into the NCAA tournament. Did make it past the first round, knocking off ranked Creighton, but then did lose in the second round. Overall in the year, 22 wins and 9 losses. Austin, your thoughts about the volleyball year?
Yeah, and we were able to hit on the volleyball year a lot early
Mm-hmm.
on in our series, just because it was happening all about the time. Things were getting super exciting around the program. We have talked about that we might be at fault for some of those losses,
Yep,
and that
that's
kind of
us.
broke the streak. But
That's us.
we've atoned for those sins, and we have talked. We have you know um, made well with the volleyball program. We
We
love
hope.
them. We really hope so. But no, you're right, Kyle. Like it was a big deal for people to be excited about volleyball, and we talked at length about it's a young team that looks set up for success in the future. And I think from kind of the very beginning of this next volleyball season, we'll see people jump on a little quicker because names are familiar now. We're a little more familiar with the sport, and people have seen that excitement that can come with it. So
Yep.
I'm really excited about it. It was a great end to the year. I know you don't win the last match of the year, but like you said, knocking off ranked Creighton, who was hosting at that site
Mm-hmm.
that was in their home gym, with some incredible highlights, was super exciting. So a really great thing for, I liken it to when softball got really big there for a second, and it's had staying power since. You still see
Yep.
people keeping up with softball, not as much maybe as when they were making the College World Series every year, but more and more now that it kind of burst onto the scene and people were able to find, I kind of like this. It's a different change of pace for me. So I see a very similar effect with the volleyball program, and they'll be one of the first people to jump back in the new athletic year. So it'll be fun to get started with them.
Yeah, I am just very pleased that we're finally talking about Brent Crouch's program in a positive light, which we tend to do here, but in one that's showing the fruits of their labor. And hopefully, we're going to continue to watch that trajectory move upward. Not necessarily to like say this is the opposite, but what I would consider for soccer was a down year
Sure.
in Coach Hoppa's standard. What I've always said about Coach Hoppa is I love that her programs are pretty consistent year to year, and if not taking a little bit of an uptick most of the time. This year, for whatever reason, was not one of the best years since I've been following them closely, and I may be misinformed a little bit about that, but I'm going to give you the record here. You got to be careful with the record here. 6 wins, 6 losses, and 6 ties. So you put those numbers together, and
Yikes.
there you go. Yeah, I saw that come up, and I was a little bit worried about that. The main thing from this year, Auburn didn't make any kind of postseason play that I recall and that I saw listed on the site. What would be, in my eyes, a down year. But this was the year they switched to accepting more ties and not playing to the end of the game and actually getting a completion. I remember venting my frustration. I think we did that on a show or something
I think
like
we
that.
did. Yep.
So that's the big thing that sticks out to me, is not even necessarily an Auburn soccer thing, but just the fact that, I mean, think about it, six ties in the record
It's a
alone.
lot.
It's ridiculous. Like, whoever decided that, shame on you. Shame on you. Let's get to the big one, though, to round out our fall review. And obviously, we're not going to hit every aspect of this. It's not the time to do that, but this is just a retrospective look back. In summary, Coach Harson's final year, what would become his final year, didn't even complete the year. Arkansas game, after that, getting fired, right following along with the hiring of John Cohen. And then we know what's taken place since then with the hiring of Hugh Freeze, postseason rebound and recruiting of sorts, but not to be forgotten in
I
the
was about
midst
to
of all.
say.
I
was about to say. I
Listen,
know he's not about to skip a moment to talk about it.
in one of the most amazing Auburn moments in one of the most awful seasons that I've had in my lifetime was this shining light of the last 4 games under Coach Carnell Cadillac Williams. So if we could, I would love to hear your thoughts about it in general, but focus mainly on that part of it. But any thoughts that you'd like to share in a retrospect of football?
Yeah, I mean, and you hit on it, and truthfully, I'm not just saying this just because we don't really want it. We've mulled on it enough. There's, we've
Just
talked about it at
episodes
length
upon episodes. Yeah.
of what was, the Harson experience, and there's
Awful.
still some talking about it to this day. So I think that when you said that Coach Carnell Cadillac Williams taking over does serve as a shining green light, possibly in the Auburn football year, is true, because I really can't remember a whole lot even before it. Yeah, I remember being disappointed and thinking, this staff's headed toward a bad way that might not last year. But I really don't remember a lot of the games and a lot of the experiences because of what came. And even though it wasn't this magical turnaround that got, us to an undefeated rest of the way and a magical story, it was Auburn's own magical story, because anyone that was at that Auburn Texas A&M game will never forget it.
No.
When Cadillac is talking to Cole Kubelik before he runs out on, let's play
chills
ball
right now, man.
I mean, just no one's going to forget that moment. And it wasn't even a good game, like a good game. It was just defensive, back and forth, kind of who wants to lose this game more. But that was Auburn. If we want to, play a tag on what the marketing campaign seems to be for the athletic department coming up, that was Auburn being Auburn that night, with Jordan-Hare Stadium just packed out and full as can be and loud. That's what I will remember from the 2022 season for sure, is the way that team ended, and Coach Cadillac getting his time in the sun with those teams. And like we said, I think overall 2-3.
Yeah.
2-3, right?
No, 2-2 for him. Are you talking about Harson?
We didn't make a bowl game.
We did not make a bowl game.
See, I can't even remember a lot of the year.
All you remember is the Texas A&M game.
Yeah, 2-2. That's right. So yeah, I mean, just an incredible job for him to finish it and keep the ship steady. And moving into Coach Freeze being hired and the whole saga that was the hiring process, but Coach Freeze being hired, Cadillac keeping the ship steady made a big impression on him too. And that's why he's still here. He got a title bump and is, over more in a leadership position with the team as associate head coach. And so remembering all of that and everything that transpired, and I really believe that's where the start of all this good momentum for Auburn on the recruiting trail and all this, because they kept it together. And what makes it even better, just a bunch of Auburn guys kept it together. Coach Cadillac, Trevon Reed, Zach Etheridge, all those guys held it together in order for this new staff to come in, and then they became a part of this new staff. And and Auburn's still picking up, the steam where they've been going even to this week. So,
Yeah.
um, it was a good end to the fall, no matter what you consider the football season as a whole.
We will never forget the rough 2 years that we've had. We will never forget the scandals or faux scandals, however you choose to view that, that came with Harsin and the lack of wins and the perceived lack of recruiting. We'll remember that, but that's not the biggest thing we'll remember. Personally, what I'm going to remember, you've already kind of mentioned it, but I'll mention it again. It's really what he said at the end of the game when interviewed once again. Auburn's going to be all right.
That's
We're
right.
going to be, and it wasn't Auburn's, we're going to be all right. And I mean, wow, that's just one of the best moments that I've experienced as an Auburn football fan in one of the worst seasons. I think that speaks a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about big topic number 2, shifting gears here. Again, it is still summer, but we are still talking basketball. It speaks to the importance that Bruce Pearl continues to make as his time here, making it a priority for Auburn fans to follow, to focus on. We have mentioned transfer portal discussions and things like that on previous episodes, but we can finally feel like definitively now, minus maybe an addition of a walk on or if somebody else comes available, the roster that is for Auburn basketball because of a brand new commitment that just came in for the Tigers this past week. A Darren Scott, a Juco power forward, essentially filling Yawan Traore, who was the first transfer out, I believe. So that kind of almost is a full circle when you think about things. So, Austin, I would just like for us very briefly in this segment to kind of take maybe a way too early look at the roster and see what we think about it. So, just opening thoughts for you about how you view this team, who's still here, who's coming in, what you got.
Yeah, it's been a big change. Not a lot of seniors that were completely done with their eligibility, and so, but it's been a big roster overhaul
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of different ways. And so, we the guard position was heavily scrutinized over the end of the year, right or wrong, but that area seems to be one of the big focal points of how all that this next roster will look with the early addition. I think Denver Jones was the very first portal
Yep.
pickup for Auburn, and a very highly sought after transfer from Florida International, um, and one a lot of people liked. Can shoot the ball at a very high clip from distance. It's what a lot of Auburn fans have been wanting more of. So I think that's going to be a big position of an upgrade, but there's a lot of cogs that got to go together. We talked about, or we've talked about how Aiden Holloway is coming in. He's still a freshman. He and Trey Donaldson will battle for that point guard spot. And then there's Denver Jones, but KD Johnson is also still here. And we all love the craziness that is KD.
Psycho.
He's our psycho.
He's our psycho.
And so, it'll be interesting to see how those things weave together. And then you go all the way up to, a lot of the portal losses for Auburn, outside of probably Alan Flanagan, were bench players, and we're guys with Chance Westry and Yohan Traore, guys that were unproven but had a lot of potential, but they decided to try their luck somewhere else, and Auburn kind of had to add depth for those spots. And I think they did that well, especially with some JUCO guys who have had experience at playing college basketball for one,
Yeah.
but have also shown success. And you hit on a Darren Scott. We always love anyone with the first initial A and the last name Scott. And
I should have known you'd work that back in here.
and so I think he'll be incredibly successful, obviously. But
yes, because every A Scott has been successful.
name one that hasn't.
That's fair. That's fair. I can see the point.
name one that has. Anyway.
Oh, you said it, not me.
But and so I think that, really when you look back on what the portal season has been and this recruiting season, I still go back to, I think, the biggest win, because nobody really expected having to deal with it, was getting Janai Broome back, because he played so well in the G League Combine, then the NBA Draft Combine, and looking like there were teams that could want to take him in the second round, and seeing if that was something he wanted to pursue. Thankfully, he's coming back, and that's a huge piece for Auburn. and they did not get blindsided by losing their big to the NBA draft, and now they're having to scramble. Other
Yep.
teams in the state are having to do that. So I'm very thankful that Janai Broom is back, and I think people are really excited about this team. I don't think everyone's super high. Outside people are high on this team because there's not a lot of big names on
Right.
it, and it looks like a lot of big names left. But I think the way Bruce Pearl and the staff has constructed this team is going to be great. And we haven't even talked about the addition in coaching
Yep.
with Coach Thompson. Yes, Corey Thompson.
Yeah. Corey. Wow. Gosh. It's
Did I
not.
miss that
It's
last
not.
name?
It's not. It's not Thompson.
This is
Wow. How am I?
embarrassing.
Well, while you correct us on the last names, Corey Williams. I think it's
Williams.
Corey
Williams.
Williams.
Yes,
Wow.
that's correct.
I had it in my head too, but when you panicked, it made me panic. It's like, do I have it wrong? Do I have
I
it
don't
wrong?
know why I went Thompson. We just went from one C Williams to another C Williams. But anyway,
Anyway.
Corey Williams, I think that'll be a great addition too. So it looks like things are whole for Auburn basketball at this moment, and
Yeah.
a lot to get excited about.
You did a good job, I think, putting it like in a kind of an all-encompassing basket there. Let's, for a few minutes here, just break it out a little bit. I think when you look at this roster, you can divide it a couple different ways: new people, old people. Really, within that, you can say guards versus big men, and what's new and what's old. Let's start with the new. Maybe Aiden Holloway comes in as the heir apparent to Wendell Green as the point guard, with Wendell no longer being here. Do not dismiss our boy Trey Donaldson. Do not dismiss him in any way. He will factor into this game at point guard, whether that is a starter or not. That's going to be a really fun thing to watch. I like that you brought up Katie. I find him as a little perplexing how he fits into this role. He is that smaller guard that I think a lot of people, not him personally, maybe sometimes, but got frustrated that saying we were smaller, we need bigger guards. And you saw Bruce do that with going out to get a lot of these bigger shooting guards, small forward type guys that can now fill a lot of different roles, whether that's Chad Baker Mazzara, Denver Jones, Chaney Johnson. It's a lot of options for Bruce to use alongside KD. So I guess a quick question for you about, like, how do you see KD fit into all of this?
Yeah, I think we saw a little bit of how KD kind of transitioned into his role last year, toward the end of last year, right? Like he's going to be probably one of your first guys off the bench, and I think he got into that role, and once he accepted it, and I think the coaching staff worked well to let him know that was going to be his role. Moving forward, officially, that might have happened on the fly during the season last year, but going into this off season, obviously when you bring in a guy like Denver Jones, who's very highly sought after and is directly above his or in his spot, with a guy like Zep Jasper leaving, it's kind of the writing's on the wall. Everybody knows what's happening. So for him to still stay and accept that role, I think we're going to really see him as one of the first two guys off the bench. And we know KD can get hot. And so I think if he stays focused on that, and then being his crazy Tasmanian defensive self, I think he will fit well in this team, and he'll still be the focus of and the love of many Auburn fans' hearts, as well as memes. I'm looking forward to those facial expressions once again.
And he will be the bane of many other team because of the way he plays. So, I bring him up as like a special topic within this discussion because I don't want us to lose sight of how special and how important KD is to this team, because we're all excited about these new guards, maybe some bigger size amongst them. But KD, let's not even forget Chris Moore. Chris Moore is a solid basketball player that's still here at the bigger guard, small forward-ish type of position, and really got a lot of respect last year. Was starting at one point, and I thought doing a very good job in what he was being asked to do there. But when you mix in special names like Denver Jones, Chad Baker Mazzara, Chaney Johnson, and then we already talked about the point guard options there too. Obviously, we don't want to get into the game of, we're going to be great. It's already written in stone, but there's some intriguing options here at guard, let alone at the big man position. And as I think we talked about it last episode, the sigh of relief that we all have had, that we've gotten back all of them. Janai Broom, Dylan Cardwell, and then my boy
I was about to
Jalen.
say,
Listen,
I'm waiting on the
I had it
names to
welling
come out
up
of your
in my
mouth.
chest because I was like, "Ugh." We almost lost him. Jalen Williams coming back to be part of this team, and you add in a Darren Scott. There is your four, probably in the rotation. Different positions: center, power forward, but that's your front court. Your thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, that's a big overhaul when you talk about, or well, not a big overhaul because you're adding a Darren Scott in, and maybe Chaney Johnson slides in there some, Chad Baker Mazara slides in there some, but you get your guys back that can contribute. And we've talked about it before. I've seen a lot of the focus on positive, negative of Jalen Williams and Chris Moore. I think these guys are such crucial cogs to this Auburn rotation, but we've seen them at their best when they don't have to be the guy. They're incredibly great role players, and they know their role and how they can help the team. When they don't have to be the guy, they're hitting all cylinders and they're on fire. I think with the additions Auburn's made now, Jalen Williams can go back to doing his thing. And, you look up and he's filling up the stat sheet, but he doesn't have to get the notoriety, and he doesn't have to be the guy that we're all talking about after the game. He's just playing his role and doing his spot, and it's effective. Same with Chris Moore. We're never going to see Chris Moore fill up, the points column for 4 straight games. It's just not going to happen. But if we had the hustle column, it'd be off the charts. We know his plus minus is going to be huge. So those guys, I'm really excited for them with the additions of the bigs, because they'll be able to fit in their roles seamlessly. And I think, I don't like when Auburn fans harp on these guys, because there are guys, yes, we always want them to play to their max potential and at their best. But these guys are quality basketball players who I have no doubt, if Jalen Williams were to leave or Chris Moore to leave, they're going to end up at good spots and they're going to be highly wanted. So it is good that we got those guys back, and it's good that they're joining this rotation of big men, because I'm excited. It's a roster full of maybe a lot of unknown, but we've got so much experience, Kyle. And so I think it's going to be a good year. It can't come quick enough.
And let it not be forgotten. And there's other players, walk-ons that we're not going to have time to mention and things like that. We're just hitting the main roster. But speaking of walk-ons,
the Berminator,
speculation, rumors not confirmed yet that I know of, that he may receive a scholarship with 2. I think there are still 2 available.
Well deserved.
Bruce tends to like to do that. He's hinted that might be coming, not to him specifically, but you do the math. Listen, folks, special players, special coaching staff, I want to call it a new era, but just a new field of things, roster-wise, coaching staff-wise. Feels like we may be heading in the right direction, and I'm excited to watch the roster that is for this upcoming year of 2023 and 2024, and we'll be talking about them a lot coming up in episodes down the line. That's going to do it for this episode of the Auburn Experience Podcast, episode 39. We appreciate you guys tuning in, hanging out with us on the way out. If you want to find me, Kyle Loomis, at Kyle Loomis 24 on Twitter. Where can they find you, Austin?
At Austin G. Scott, Twitter, Instagram, the things. Kyle, I don't think it was that bad for our first quote-unquote summer show. Thank goodness this is the Auburn Experience for sports, culture, and family, because we're going to have quite a bit of things of probably culture and family over the summer we're going to need. So
yes,
hit us up if you got some topics. Let's hear it, and maybe we'll work it in this summer.
Yes, or we can just spend the entire episode berating you for not liking sweet tea. So I'm game for that every single week if that's what we need to do.
That's probably inevitable, so that's fine.
We won't give him too hard of a time. And thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. Until we talk to you again. War Eagle.